I have been afraid of monsters for as long as I can remember. Now I'm 8 years old and hate anything that has to do with them. I loathe scary movies and Halloween, but the thing that I am most afraid of is the dark. My parents have tried many things to eliminate my fears, like hanging a "No Monsters Allowed" sign on my bedroom door and leaving a battery-operated nightlight in my room in case the power goes out in the middle of the night. This has happened to me before, and I was so terribly frightened that I slept in Mom and Dad's bed for 3 months. Even Grandma tried to help by giving me a spray bottle filled with her own special potion that supposedly keeps the monsters away if you spray it all over your room right before bedtime. I'm not naive though. That special potion looks a lot like Grandma's kale and avocado smoothies, and it does not have a very pleasant scent. Every night, Mom bathes me, reads me a story, and then Dad comes in to tuck me into bed. He checks under the bed, in the closet, and in all corners for any monsters. However, tonight wasn't like every other night. We had just returned home from our vacation to Florida to visit my Aunt Karen and her family. Grandma house sat for us while we were away. I remember Dad calling Grandma from the car because I was in a panic. I had forgotten to tell her to feed my goldfish once a day. "Hello?" Grandma said sweetly as she picked up the phone. "Grandma, it's me. I forgot to tell you to feed Goldie every day at 11 o'clock. "Okay, honey," she replied. "Thanks, Grandma." The doorbell chimed and cut me off before I could tell her goodbye. The phone was on loudspeaker and Dad butted in asking, "Mom, who's that at the door?" "Oh, it's just the mailman. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a nice trip." We had an amazing time on our vacation until the 3rd day. Dad wasn't feeling well, so we had to come back home early. I was so disappointed that our trip had to end, but Dad was as sick as a dog and too weak to get out of bed. Mom was so busy caring for Dad that I spent the entire day over at Grandma's house. I like spending time with Grandma, but sometimes it can be boring. Like today, she had her weekly book club meeting in the morning. It only lasted an hour, but it seemed like an eternity. I remained in the living room watching an old black and white VHS tape because Grandma refuses to pay for cable. Next, she took me grocery shopping, and she just had to find the cheapest one of everything she wanted to buy, which took even longer than our book club meeting. Then, when we got to the checkout line, I just knew Grandma would buy me a candy bar for being so good. I didn't complain not once, even though she took all day in there. But Grandma just looked at me shocked. "Tommy, I can't bring myself to pay a whole $1 for a chocolate bar. In my days, you could get one of those for 10 cents. You don't need that anyway. It'll rot your teeth," she stated matter-of-factly. "I'll fix you a nice kale and avocado smoothie when we get home," she promised me. I was dying of boredom, so I asked Grandma if she could just drop me off at home on our way back from the grocery store. "Are you sure?" "I can fix you a ham and cheese sandwich for lunch to go with your kale and avocado smoothie," she told me. "I don't want you to catch whatever it is that your father has. You can spend the night with me," she suggested with a warm smile. "Thanks, Grandma, but I've nearly finished my Lego pirate ship. I was really looking forward to finishing it by the weekend," I answered quietly. "Well, okay," she replied sadly. I felt really bad. Ever since Grandpa had passed away a year ago, Grandma was very lonely. I know she enjoys my company, but there was no way I was staying the night over there again. The last time I did, I didn't sleep a wink. I was exhausted the next morning, and when Grandma questioned me about what was the matter, I had told her that I kept hearing strange noises all night long. She assured me that it was only because the house was very old, but I knew it was the monsters walking around, searching, trying to find me. What made it even worse was that Grandma doesn't have any nightlights at her house, and I know better than to even ask to leave any lights on all night. If there's one thing she despises, it's wasting electricity. At 8 p.m. sharp every night, Grandma's house goes pitch black, and the lights stay off until darkness falls the following night. Then, she only turns the lights on for a few hours. When we arrived at my house, I was expecting Grandma to just drop me off, but she cut the ignition off and opened her door. "I forgot something while I was house sitting for your parents," she stated. I ran upstairs to my room, and Grandma went about trying to locate whatever it was she had left here. I peeked out my window 15 minutes later, and her car was gone. I guess she had found what she was looking for. I was relieved to be home where I had lots of things to do. I begged Mom to let me play outside for a little while before dinner. She was extremely reluctant, but finally caved and warned me not to step 1 foot off of the front porch. I promised that I wouldn't, snatched my jacket from the coat rack, and darted out the door. As I closed the screen door behind me, I heard Mom whispering to herself, "It's just so horrifying what happened to Jacob. I can't even imagine. So horrible." Jacob Wilder was an 8-year-old boy who lived a few houses down from us. We were in the same class at Cambridge Elementary, and he was my friend. He could be annoying sometimes, though. The way that he would brag about his 100 pack of crayons with the built-in sharpener on the back, when I and the rest of the kids in class only had the little 24 pack. He would take the pack home from school every weekend and bring it over to my house sometimes so we could draw and color together. His pack had all of the unique colors with the cool names, like macaroni and cheese, purple pizzazz, and my personal favorite, robin egg blue. Anyways, Jacob went missing a few days ago, and then the police discovered his body in the woods behind the school, badly mutilated. Everyone in town has been on edge ever since. Parents were dropping off and picking up their children from school every day. Security guards were set up at all entrances and exits at the school. The streets, which are usually crowded with kids playing after school, have been desolate since Jacob's disappearance because his killer is still out there. There were no leads or suspects in the investigation. The police didn't know where to begin. I played in silence with my race cars on the front porch until Mom called me in for dinner. She handed me a plate of leftover lasagna and walked off with a bowl of chicken noodle soup for Dad. After dinner, I went to watch some TV. Mom came into the living room an hour later and said it was time for bed. So I took my bath, chose one of my favorite stories, A Bad Case of Stripes, and changed into my favorite PJs, my blue and green dinosaur ones. I grabbed the book and headed down the hall toward my parents' room. As I entered, I noticed how horribly ill my father appeared. Dad had been sick plenty of times before, but I had never seen him like this. Suddenly, I glanced nervously at Mom. She saw the worry in my eyes and calmly reassured me that everything was all right. She explained that he had just started a new medication. Dad looked unconscious, but was only sleeping, so I softly kissed his cheek and then cuddled up next to Mom on the leather couch in the corner. She read to me until I fell asleep. Then she carefully lifted me and carried me to my room. She gently deposited me into my bed and placed the cover snugly around me. She sauntered back to her bedroom and was about to crawl into bed when she realized she had forgotten to take her medication. She headed to the kitchen for a glass of water and then returned to her room. She clutched the sleeping pill bottle tightly in her hand, popped the top, and swallowed 2 with a gulp. She placed the empty glass on her nightstand and grabbed her iPod and earbuds from the side table drawer. Once she got comfortable, she put the earbuds in her ears, scrolled through her playlist, and settled on the soothing sounds of Niagara Falls. As she started to drift off to sleep, she reached over absent-mindedly and turned off the lamp. Moments later, she was in a deep sleep. Sometime during the middle of the night, I awoke, tucked snugly into my own bed, surrounded by darkness. I panicked and bolted upright in bed. Mom had forgotten to turn on either of my nightlights. Had she checked the closet, under the bed, and in all of the corners for monsters like Dad always did? I began to cry out, but then reconsidered, remembering how sick Dad was. I didn't want to disturb him. I figured I could just hop out of bed, dart across the room to my desk, and cut on my battery-powered nightlight. That would be a lot easier than trying to locate my plug-in one somewhere in the mess of toys all over my bedroom floor. Even if I was lucky enough to find it, then I would have to battle with the wall trying to find the outlet. I wondered why the night sky seemed to be unusually dark tonight. Normally, there was some kind of faint glow, either from the stars or moon, sometimes a combination of both, that would stream in through my spaceship curtains. As I cautiously lowered one foot out of the bed, terrible thoughts began to race through my mind. Thoughts of monsters grabbing me from beneath the bed, or leaping out of the closet and dragging me away into the night, into the darkness. I began to pray. I asked God to protect me from monsters and also for Dad to feel better soon. I always hoped that my prayers would be answered quickly, but I knew that God was very busy. Grandma would always tell me that God takes so long to answer prayers because he's occupied trying to detect all of the non-believers. She says that he won't answer their prayers. She would point them out to me every Sunday at church and joke that they should have their very own church to attend because there are so many of them. They would approach Grandma after Sunday service and chit-chat about a bunch of nothing, smile in her face the entire time, and then kiss her cheek and hug her goodbye like they were longtime friends. This irritated Grandma so badly that one day on our way home from church, she looked as if she were about to go out on a murderous rampage. She uttered all of these naughty words that I'm not allowed to say. Some of them I'd never even heard before. It's like she had forgotten that I was even there. That day, I saw a look in her eyes that I'd never witnessed in her before. Pure rage. When she finally snapped out of it and noticed me in the back seat staring in disbelief, she apologized profusely. I told her that I hadn't been paying attention. I was thinking about some joke my friend had told me at school the other day. She just smiled that warm smile she always gives me and asked me to please not tell my parents. I never did. I was scaring myself thinking all of these horrid thoughts. I took a deep breath and bravely, but slowly, slid one foot from under the covers again. It touched the cold, bare wood floor. As I began to slide my other foot from under the covers, I thought I felt a cool breeze blowing from underneath the bed. I began to breathe heavily, my heart beating out of my chest. Something grazed against the heel of my foot, tickling it. I peeked over the side of the bed and caught sight of something white. I leaned over a little closer and snatched it rapidly. It was a letter, addressed to me. Yes, it clearly had Tommy scrawled across the top in all uppercase letters. That was the only word I was able to make out in my unilluminated room. I placed the letter on top of my pillow and raced to the light switch next to the door. I jumped and flicked at the wall furiously until I striked it to the on position. I breathed a sigh of relief as the room lit up and I peeked around in a hurry. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, so I scrambled back to the bed, lifted the letter from my pillow, and began to read. Tommy, I tried to warn you before it was too late. It's too late for me, but maybe not for you. Please, you have to find a way to stop. That was it. The letter just ended suddenly. It was written in red crayon and had no signature. I rushed to my parents' room, tears streaming down my cheeks, and burst through the door. Neither of them budged. I ran to Mom's side of the bed and shook her so ferociously that her iPod slipped from her hand to the floor. That caused the earbuds to be plucked from her ears and get tangled in her hair. She woke up in a daze, not quite sure what was happening. I hopped on top of the bed and began waving the letter back and forth in front of her tired face. Tommy, what's going on? Calm down. What's wrong? My father began to stir beside her. I tried my best to calm down, but couldn't. Mom, I finally managed to say. I just found this letter in my room. I think it was under my bed. Mom read the letter, and I expected her to jump up in a panic and call the police, but she tranquilly lowered it and said to me, Tommy, it's probably just one of your friends playing some kind of a joke. Wasn't Lewis just over here last week? If I remember correctly, you two were coloring in your new coloring books that you got for your birthday. It seemed like a reasonable explanation. That night, I ended up sleeping on the leather couch in my parents' room. The next morning, Grandma came over to check on Dad. Mom mentioned the letter I had found to her, and she agreed with Mom that it was probably just Lewis playing a joke on me. "Kids will be kids," she said nonchalantly. Then Grandma went on telling Mom how she had seen Mrs. Wilder, Jacob's mother, at the farmer's market. She had asked her if they heard anything from the police about his murder. Mrs. Wilder had replied, "No, nothing yet," as tears filled her eyes. "We must keep them in our prayers," Grandma said to Mom. "Yes, of course," Mom replied sadly. Mrs. Wilder was a very nice lady. After we found out that Jacob was dead, she had offered me his 100 pack of crayons that he had been so proud of. I declined, of course. I would have felt weird taking something that belonged to a dead boy. Grandma stayed to visit until lunchtime. Then I kissed her sweetly on her cheek and waved goodbye from the window as her car pulled away. Later that night, as I snuggled into bed, I heard Mom talking on the phone down the hall. I couldn't make out what she was saying, but then her voice suddenly rose in anger. "No, I'm not taking him to the hospital." She breathed a loud sigh of relief. "It was a false alarm," she told whoever was on the phone. Then I heard her slam the phone down. A minute later, she came in to tuck me in and say goodnight. "Is everything okay?" I asked her. "It's fine, sweetie. Dad's just not feeling well," she told me. I hugged her tightly and gave her a kiss goodnight. She tucked me in, cut on my nightlight, and then closed my door. I had a terrifying nightmare that night. I woke up sweating bullets. I wiped my sweaty face with my blanket, and as I laid back down onto my pillow to try to go back to sleep, my hands glided across something. I lifted my pillow and pulled out a small notebook. I didn't recognize it, but when I opened it, I noticed that it contained paper that had little angels going all the way around the border. Where did it come from, and how had it gotten there? All of a sudden, I heard a loud, thumping sound. My heart stopped. I held my breath. The thumping sound, it was coming from under the bed. I pulled the covers tightly around me and placed them over my head. I listened intently for a minute. I didn't hear the thumping sound anymore. Or did I? How could I make out any sound over my heavy breathing and body shaking? I emerged from beneath the covers and listened for the sound again. I didn't hear anything but silence. So I crept to the edge of the bed, kneeled, and began to bend my body with caution over the side. As I got low enough, I could hear heavy breathing, and I knew that it was not my own. I caught only a glimpse of a dark shadow under there. Before I could retreat, something cold and clammy gripped my arm tightly. I tried to wrestle my arm free, but whatever it was strong. It yanked me so hard that I flew off of the bed and hit the floor with a thunderous boom. My eyes remained closed, but I continued to fight, trying to free myself. As I fought this thing blindly, whatever it was, I thought I heard a muffled voice speaking somewhere in the distance. It sounded like Dad, but I must have been imagining it. I prayed for someone to come and help, to save me from this monster. I finally got the courage to open my eyes, and as I did, I caught a glimpse of something sticking out from under my dresser. I reached for it and grabbed it with my fingertips. I squinted in the darkness and recognized the object immediately. It was a red crayon, with the name Strawberry Shortcake written down the side. I only knew one person who owned a crayon with that name, and they were no longer alive. So how had it gotten here? There was no way Jacob left it. He always counted every single crayon in the pack to make sure he had all 100 before he left. I continued to twist and pull with all of my strength until I finally got away from the monster. I leaped onto my bed and seized the only thing close enough to use as a weapon, the notebook I had just found. As I raised it and prepared myself to attack, a silhouette emerged from the darkness. A strip of moonlight shining through a crack in my curtains illuminated the figure's face long enough for the realization to hit me like a ton of bricks. Dreadful thoughts started to run through my mind. I thought back to when my family had went on vacation. I realized I had seen that angel paper before too. The note that I had discovered in my room was written on that same paper, and it was written with that red strawberry shortcake crayon that I found tonight. The letter had been from Jacob. He was trying to warn me of the evil lurking right under my nose. She grinned from ear to ear, and her eyes turned crimson red. "You're a smart boy, Tommy. I see you found my notebook. I've been looking for it." I let out a blood-curdling scream, but she quickly and methodically began to strangle me with her purse strap. As my body started to go limp, she loosened her grip. I took the opportunity to try and escape, but my body felt so weak. The last thing I felt was a sharp sensation in the middle of my back. The last thing I thought about was when I called home to remind Grandma to feed my goldfish. The doorbell rang while we were on the phone, and she said it was the mailman. But it was a Sunday that we left. There's no mail on Sunday. That was the day that Jacob went missing. Her teeth gleamed in the early morning sunrise. It was too late for me now, too.
The only trace of Tommy left were a few shreds of his blue and green dinosaur pajamas. Later that morning, Rachel headed to the kitchen expecting Tommy to be gobbling down a bowl of cereal. However, the kitchen was empty, so she walked down the hallway to Tommy's bedroom and opened the door. Tommy was gone. All she found was a room covered in blood and shreds of what looked to be his favorite pajamas. She spotted a notebook she didn't recognize, picked it up, and dashed into the bedroom to wake up Jim.
"Jim! Jim!"
She screamed as she busted through the door. She flicked on the light and saw him lying on the ground. She shook him trying to wake him, but he was cold as ice, dead, gone. Sometime during the night, just like Tommy. She fell to her knees and an ear-splitting shriek erupted from the pits of her soul. When the police arrived, they asked Rachel lots of questions, but she had no answers. The medication and soothing sounds have helped her sleep through it all, the death of her husband and the murder of her son. The paramedics told her that Jim died from sudden cardiac arrest. They think he fell out of bed trying to get to Tommy. The coroner ruled that the time of death was 4:30 a.m. Rachel was sitting in a state of shock on the front porch wrapped in a blanket. Grandma was sitting beside her trying to console her. As the stretcher wheeled Jim past them towards the ambulance, Grandma stared in shock and disbelief. She whispers,
"I guess that's 10 instead of 9.
Rachel asks, "What did you say?" As something drops beneath the blanket. Grandma replies,
"I said, oh, that's my notebook I've been trying to find."
Tommy had prayed to God to be protected from monsters, when he should have been praying to be protected from Grandma. I guess there's some things worse than monsters.
Subscribe for a new story Mondays, Wednesdays, and don't forget Saturdays. See you next time on
Nina's Nightmares.
Really? You're supposed to click the like button, not me. Ugh.